I, 30M, work in tech and have had an incredible year at my job. After months of grueling projects, tight deadlines, and sleepless nights, I received a significant year-end bonus, $50,000. I was thrilled, not just because of the money itself but because I've been diligently saving to buy a house. This bonus felt like the final push I needed to get closer to that dream. When I told my fiancée, 28F, about the bonus, she seemed genuinely happy for me. She knows how important homeownership is to me and how I've been working toward this goal for years. We even talked about what kind of house we'd like and the neighborhoods we'd consider raising a family in. It felt like we were on the same page. But then, out of nowhere, she dropped a bombshell. A couple of days after I shared the news, my fiancée sat me down and asked if I could spare $25,000 of my bonus to help her parents pay off their mortgage. She explained that her parents had been struggling financially for years and that this money could significantly ease their burden. I was taken aback. While I empathize with her parents' situation, this wasn't something we had ever discussed before. Her parents had never asked me for help directly, and to suddenly be asked for such a large amount of money felt like a lot. I told her I couldn't do it. I explained that this bonus was going toward our future, the house we had been planning together. I reminded her how hard I'd worked to earn it and how this money was crucial to achieving our shared goals. Her response shocked me. She called me selfish and accused me of not caring about her family. She then said that since we were getting married, her parents were going to be my family too, and it was only fair for me to step up and help. Since that conversation, things have been tense. My fiancée has been distant and cold, barely speaking to me unless it's absolutely necessary. To make matters worse, she told her parents about my bonus, without asking me first. Her parents haven't outright asked me for money, but they've made several pointed comments whenever we're around them. Her mom said, "It must be nice to have a job that pays so well. Some people can only dream of having that kind of opportunity." Her dad added, "If I had that kind of money, I'd make sure to take care of the people who matter most." I feel like I'm being guilt-tripped from all sides. I tried to explain to my fiancée again that my priority is our future and that I'm not comfortable giving away half of my bonus, but she dismissed me, saying, "What future? You're already showing you don't care about the people who matter to me." After days of tension at home, I needed to get some perspective. I reached out to my closest friends, hoping they could help me navigate the situation. I explained everything: the bonus, the request, the escalating guilt trips, and my fiancé's cold behavior. Their reactions were mixed. One of my friends, David, immediately sided with me. "That's your money, man. You worked hard for it. If her parents need help, that's unfortunate, but it's not your responsibility to fix their financial problems. Especially not $25,000 worth." He brought up a valid point. If you give them this money now, what happens next time they're struggling? Are you supposed to bail them out every time because you're part of the family now? His words hit home. I hadn't even considered the precedent this could set. On the other hand, my friend Sarah had a more nuanced view. "I get where you're coming from, but marriage isn't just about you and her, it's about joining each other's families. If her parents are in trouble, maybe helping them, even a little, could show you're committed to her beyond just your shared goals." She suggested I offer a smaller amount, like $5,000, as a compromise. "It's not just about the money," she said. "It's about showing you're willing to support her family, even if it's not convenient for you." Her suggestion gave me pause. Could this be a way to de-escalate the situation without completely giving in? But then I thought about how my fiancée and her parents were already treating me. Would even a smaller gesture lead to more demands down the road? When I told my friends about the guilt-tripping comments from her parents, they were split again. David was livid. "That's manipulative as hell. They're trying to shame you into giving them money. Honestly, if they're this entitled now, it's only going to get worse after you're married." Sarah was more sympathetic but still agreed that her parents' approach was out of line. "It's one thing for her to ask you privately, but the way they're talking about your money is really inappropriate." Their advice left me with more questions than answers. On one hand, I didn't want to come off as heartless or unsupportive. On the other hand, I felt like my boundaries were already being disrespected. That night, I lay awake replaying their words in my head. Was I being selfish, as my fiancée claimed? Or was I justified in standing firm about how I wanted to use the money I earned? I decided to stick to my original stance, at least for now. I wasn't ready to sacrifice such a large chunk of my bonus, especially when it felt like my fiancée and her parents weren't respecting my autonomy. But I knew this wasn't the end of the conversation. The days following my decision not to share my bonus were some of the most uncomfortable in my life. My fiancée's cold behavior turned into full-blown passive aggression. She barely spoke to me, and when she did, her tone was sharp. It was like walking on eggshells in my own home. One night, as we were eating dinner in near silence, she suddenly said, You know, it's not about the money. It's about what it represents. If you can't see how much my parents mean to me, what does that say about us? I tried to keep my response calm and measured. It's not that I don't care about your parents. I do. But this money is something I worked really hard for, and I've been saving for years to build a future for us. I just don't think it's fair for me to be expected to hand over such a large amount, especially when they haven't even asked me directly. She shook her head and sighed, clearly dissatisfied with my answer. Then there were the little comments she started making throughout the day. If we talked about anything remotely financial, like budgeting or bills, she'd throw in remarks like, "Must be nice to have a cushion like that bonus. Some people don't have that luxury." Even worse, she started bringing up her siblings. "You know, my brother sends them money every month. He doesn't earn nearly as much as you do, but he always finds a way to help. It's called family." Hearing this over and over again was exhausting. I felt like I was constantly being compared and judged, not just by her but by her entire family. Speaking of her family, her parents continued their campaign of thinly veiled guilt-tripping. Whenever we visited them, they'd make comments like, "It's such a blessing to have children who care about their parents' struggles. Some people have the means to really make a difference in their loved ones' lives. If we could just catch a break, life would be so much easier." They never outright asked me for money, but their intentions were crystal clear. Every comment felt like a pointed jab, and it was becoming harder to keep my cool. The tipping point came during a Sunday dinner at her parents' house. Her dad made a toast and said, "To family, the people who always have your back, no matter what. We're so proud of the kids who always find ways to show how much they care." It felt like a direct attack, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. I put my glass down and calmly said, "I understand you're going through a tough time, and I truly feel for you. But I'm uncomfortable with the way money keeps being brought up in these conversations. If there's something you want to discuss with me, I'd prefer you just say it outright." The room went dead silent. My fiancée's mom looked shocked, and her dad just stared at me. My fiancée, on the other hand, looked furious. Her mom finally broke the silence with a nervous laugh. "Oh, we didn't mean anything by it. We're just making conversation." I nodded and said, "I appreciate that, but I think it's important to be clear about boundaries." The rest of the dinner was incredibly awkward, and I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. When we got home, my fiancée exploded. "How could you embarrass my parents like that?" she yelled. "You made them feel like beggars when all they've ever done is sacrifice for me and my siblings. Do you even care about how that made me look?" I was stunned. "Embarrass them? Are you serious? They've been making passive-aggressive comments about my bonus for days, and I finally stood up for myself. I didn't say anything disrespectful." She scoffed. "You don't get it. You don't understand what it means to be part of a family. Sometimes you do things you don't want to because it's the right thing to do." At that point, I'd had enough. "I am part of a family, or at least I thought I was building one with you. But right now, it feels like I'm being treated like a wallet instead of a partner." Her face turned red, and she stormed out of the room. The next day, I reached out to David and Sarah again, needing someone to vent to. David was, unsurprisingly, livid on my behalf. "This is insane. They're treating you like an ATM, man. And your fiancé is enabling it. You need to seriously think about whether this is what you want for the rest of your life." Sarah, while still sympathetic, urged me to tread carefully. "I get why you're upset, but don't let this spiral out of control. If you still want to marry her, you need to find a way to work through this together. Maybe consider couples counseling?" Her suggestion made sense, but I wasn't sure if my fiancé would even be open to it. That night, I sat down alone and really thought about everything. I realized this situation wasn't just about the money. It was about communication, respect, and boundaries. If my fiancé couldn't respect my decision about my bonus now, how would we handle bigger financial decisions in the future? Would I always be expected to prioritize her family's needs over our own goals? I loved her, but I was starting to wonder if we were truly aligned in our values. After days of tension and unresolved arguments, I realized we couldn't keep going like this. I needed to address the growing rift between us head-on. I decided to have an honest and calm conversation with my fiancée about everything: the bonus, her parents' involvement, and, most importantly, the way this situation was making me question our compatibility. I waited until we had an evening to ourselves and asked if we could talk. She looked wary, probably expecting another fight, but agreed. "I want to start by saying that I love you," I began. "But this situation with the bonus, your parents, and how we've been handling it, it's making me feel like we're not on the same page about some important things." She crossed her arms defensively. "Like what?" I took a deep breath. "Like boundaries. Like communication. Like how we see money and family and our future together. Right now, it feels like we're not a team, and that scares me." At first, she didn't say much, just stared at the floor. Then she spoke, her voice softer than I expected. I guess I've been so focused on helping my parents that I didn't stop to think about how this was affecting you, she admitted. They've been through so much, and I feel like I owe it to them to do whatever I can. I guess I expected you to feel the same way because we're supposed to be a family now. I nodded, appreciating her honesty. I get that you want to help them, and I admire how much you care about your family. But you didn't ask me, you told me. And when I said no, it felt like you didn't respect my decision. She frowned. I just didn't think it was that big of an ask. I mean, you have the money. It's not like it's going to hurt you to give them something. This was the moment I'd been dreading, but I knew I had to say it. It's not just about the money, I said. It's about the principle. If I give $25,000 to your parents now, what happens next time they're struggling? What happens when we have our own mortgage, or kids, or emergencies? I need to know that we can make decisions together without outside pressure. She looked conflicted. So, you're saying I shouldn't care about my family's struggles? No, that's not what I'm saying, I replied quickly. I'm saying we need to put our relationship and our future first. That doesn't mean abandoning your parents, but it does mean setting boundaries so that we're not constantly sacrificing our goals to fix their problems. By now, it was clear we weren't going to resolve everything in one conversation. I decided to take Sarah's advice and suggest couples counseling. I think we need help working through this, I said. This isn't just about the bonus, it's about how we handle conflicts and make decisions as a couple. I want us to be stronger together, and I think counseling could help us get there. She looked surprised. You think we need counseling? Are we that bad? No, I said firmly. But I think we're struggling, and I don't want to ignore that. I want to fix this because I love you, and I want to build a life with you. But we need to be on the same page. She didn't agree right away, but she didn't shut it down either. I'll think about it, she said eventually. But I need you to understand how important my family is to me. I don't know if I can just put them second. Her words stung, but I let them go for the moment. I was just relieved that she was open to the idea of counseling. After the conversation, I felt a mix of emotions. I was glad we had finally talked honestly, but her hesitation about counseling and her inability to prioritize our relationship left me with lingering doubts. Was this something we could work through, or were we fundamentally incompatible? After our conversation, my fiancée agreed to try couples counseling. While it felt like a step forward, the underlying tension in our relationship hadn't disappeared. She was still distant, and her parents' subtle guilt-tripping hadn't let up. I hoped counseling would give us a chance to unpack everything and rebuild the trust that had been eroding. Our first session with the therapist, Dr. Miller, started with introductions and an overview of why we were there. I explained, as neutrally as possible, that the conflict over my bonus had exposed deeper issues around communication, boundaries, and priorities. My fiancé, on the other hand, framed it differently. I just feel like he doesn't understand how important my family is to me, she said. They've sacrificed so much for me, and I feel like it's my responsibility to help them now that I'm in a position to do so. Dr. Miller nodded thoughtfully and asked, do you feel like he's not supportive of your family, or is it more about the specific situation with the bonus? She hesitated before answering. I think it's both. He's supportive in small ways, but when it comes to the big stuff, like this, it feels like he's drawing a line in the sand. I jumped in, trying to clarify my perspective. It's not that I don't care about her family. I do. But $25,000 is a lot of money, and I feel like it's unfair to expect me to give up half of my bonus when we're supposed to be saving for our future together. Dr. Miller asked us both to dig deeper into our feelings, and as we talked, it became clear that the issue wasn't just the money, it was about control, expectations, and how we define family. The session revealed something I hadn't fully understood before. My fiancée saw helping her parents as an extension of who she was. To her, saying no to her parents felt like betraying her identity. Dr. Miller gently pointed this out. It sounds like, for you, helping your parents isn't just about the money. It's about fulfilling a sense of duty and gratitude. Is that accurate? My fiancé nodded. Yes, exactly. They've done so much for me, and I feel like I owe them. It's not just about the mortgage, it's about everything they've given up for me. I could empathize with her feelings, but I still struggled with the expectation that I should be part of that repayment plan. Dr. Miller asked me how I felt about her perspective. I understand why she feels that way, I said. But I think it's unfair to expect me to share the same sense of obligation. I didn't grow up with them. I don't have the same history. And honestly, I think it's important for us to focus on our own future instead of constantly trying to fix someone else's past. Dr. Miller nodded and said, this sounds like a clash of values, which isn't uncommon in relationships. The key is figuring out how to compromise in a way that honors both of your perspectives without resentment. By the end of the session, we agreed on a tentative plan. I wouldn't give her parents $25,000, but I would contribute a smaller, one-time amount as a gesture of goodwill, something like $2,000 to $5,000. This would allow me to maintain my financial boundaries while showing that I cared about her family's struggles. My fiancée seemed lukewarm about the idea. "It's better than nothing, I guess," she said. Dr. Miller encouraged us to continue communicating openly and to avoid making decisions without mutual agreement. While the counseling session felt productive, things at home remained tense. My fiancée kept bringing up the plan to give her parents a smaller amount, but her tone suggested she wasn't fully on board. "Are you sure that's all you can do?" she asked one evening. "I just feel like it's barely going to make a difference." Her attitude frustrated me. "This was the compromise we agreed on," I reminded her. "If it's not enough for you, then we need to go back to counseling and figure out another solution." She didn't respond, but her silence spoke volumes. When her parents heard about the smaller contribution, they weren't thrilled either. Her dad said something like, "Well, it's better than nothing, but it's a shame he can't do more. You'd think someone in his position would want to help family." I felt anger bubbling under the surface, but I tried to stay calm. I told my fiancée later, "If your parents keep making comments like that, I'm going to stop engaging with them about this altogether. It's not fair for them to guilt me when I'm already compromising." She nodded but didn't defend me, which hurt. At this point, I started questioning our long-term compatibility more seriously. This situation had revealed so many cracks in our relationship, not just around money, but around communication, values, and respect. Would we always be at odds over her family? Would I always feel like I was fighting for my autonomy while she prioritized their needs? I decided to bring these concerns up at our next counseling session, hoping we could get some clarity about whether our relationship was salvageable. Our second counseling session with Dr. Miller came just a week after the first. While the first session had brought some insights, it was clear that the underlying issues weren't resolved. The compromise about contributing a smaller amount to her parents' mortgage had only temporarily calmed the waters, and the tension at home and with her family was still very present. This session felt heavier, and I was determined to address my growing doubts about our relationship. Dr. Miller started the session by asking us how things had been since the last meeting. I let my fiancée speak first, and she didn't hold back. "I still feel like he's prioritizing money over my family," she said. "I understand he doesn't want to give the full amount, but even with the compromise, it feels like he's just trying to appease me rather than genuinely caring about their struggles." I felt a pang of frustration. I had agreed to give thousands of dollars, even though I didn't think it was my responsibility, and yet she was still dissatisfied. "That's not fair," I said. "I've compromised more than I'm comfortable with because I care about you and your family. But I feel like no matter what I do, it's not enough." Dr. Miller nodded and said, "It sounds like there's a disconnect in how you're both interpreting this compromise. Let's explore that. Fiancé's name, what would enough look like to you?" My fiancé hesitated before saying, "I don't know. I guess I just want to feel like he's as invested in my family as I am. This isn't just about the money. It's about what it represents: support, unity, being there for each other. Right now, it feels like he's drawing a line between his money and my family, and that hurts." Her words stung because they made me sound selfish, but I could tell she genuinely felt this way. Dr. Miller then turned to me. "How do you feel hearing her say that?" I took a moment before responding. "I understand where she's coming from, but I feel like she's not seeing my side. I've worked hard for this money, and I've been saving for years to build a future for us. When I think about support and unity, I think about us, our goals, our life together. I feel like I'm being asked to sacrifice that for people who aren't even my responsibility." Dr. Miller encouraged us to dig deeper into these feelings, and what came out surprised me. My fiancée admitted that she had always felt a sense of obligation toward her parents because of how much they'd done for her growing up. "They gave up so much to make sure I had a good life," she said. "Now that they're struggling, I feel like it's my turn to take care of them. And when my name resists helping, it feels like he's rejecting a part of me." This was the first time she had articulated it so clearly, and it gave me some clarity. But it didn't change my perspective. "I don't see it that way," I replied. "I don't think helping your parents has to mean sacrificing our future. I want to support them in ways that make sense, but I also need to know that our relationship and our goals are the priority." Dr. Miller summed it up well. "It seems like the two of you have fundamentally different views on what it means to support family. The challenge will be finding a middle ground that respects both of your values without creating resentment." As the session continued, I felt a growing need to address my doubts about our compatibility. "I'm going to be honest," I said. "This situation has made me question whether we're truly aligned in our values. I love you, but I'm worried that this issue with your parents is just the first of many. What happens if they need help again in the future? Will I always be expected to prioritize their needs over ours? My fiancé looked hurt but didn't interrupt. I continued, I need to know that we're building a life together as equals. Right now, it feels like I'm being asked to shoulder more of the burden, financially and emotionally, and I'm not sure if that's sustainable. For the first time, my fiancé seemed to take my concerns seriously. I don't want you to feel like I'm not prioritizing us, she said. But I don't know how to balance my loyalty to my parents with what you're asking of me. I feel like I'm being forced to choose, and I hate it. Dr. Miller stepped in and said, this is a common struggle in relationships, especially when families are involved. It's not about choosing one over the other, it's about finding a balance that works for both of you. But that balance can only happen if there's open communication and mutual respect. By the end of the session, we had agreed to keep working on our communication and boundaries. My fiancée said she would try to be more mindful of how her requests and her parents' comments were affecting me. I agreed to continue exploring ways to support her family without compromising our own goals. But as we left the session, I still felt uneasy. While the conversation had been productive, I couldn't shake the feeling that our fundamental differences might not be bridgeable. The weeks following the second counseling session were a whirlwind of reflection, conversations, and uncomfortable realizations. While counseling had helped clarify some of the deeper issues between my fiancé and me, it also highlighted just how much work we'd need to do to overcome our differences. The pressure from her family, combined with her own struggles to prioritize our relationship, was taking a toll on me. I knew a decision had to be made, one way or another, about whether we could realistically build a future together. One evening, about 2 weeks after our second counseling session, the issue came to a head. Her parents invited us over for dinner again, and while I hesitated to go, my fiancé insisted. They're trying, she said. They want to show you that they're willing to move forward. Reluctantly, I agreed, hoping that this time would be different. At first, things seemed normal enough. Her mom served a delicious meal, and her dad avoided making any of his usual passive-aggressive comments about money. I let myself relax a little, thinking maybe we were finally turning a corner. But then, as we were finishing dessert, her mom brought up the mortgage again. We're so grateful for everything our children have done to support us, she said, looking pointedly at me. It's a blessing to have family who understands the importance of helping each other in tough times. I felt the tension rise immediately. Her words weren't as overt as before, but the implication was clear. My fiancé didn't say anything to defend me or redirect the conversation, which felt like a betrayal. I stayed polite but distant for the rest of the evening, and as soon as we left, I told her how I felt. When we got home, I couldn't hold back anymore. This isn't working, I said. I feel like no matter what I do, it's never enough. Your parents are still pressuring me, and you're still expecting me to shoulder their struggles. I can't keep doing this. She looked stunned. Are you saying you're done with me? I'm saying I don't think we're compatible, I replied, my voice heavy with emotion. I love you, but this isn't the kind of partnership I want. I need someone who values our relationship as much as I do, and right now, it feels like your loyalty to your parents is always going to come first. She started crying, saying, that's not fair. I've been trying. I've gone to counseling with you. I've done everything you asked. I shook my head. You've made some efforts, and I appreciate that. But the fact that you didn't say anything tonight when your mom made that comment? It tells me that you're still not ready to set boundaries. And I don't know if you ever will be. After hours of emotional back and forth, we agreed to take some time apart. She moved in with a friend temporarily while we figured out what to do next. During that time, I reflected on everything, the love we shared, the dreams we'd talked about, and the harsh realities that had come to light. Ultimately, I realized that while I loved her, I couldn't see a future where I was constantly battling her family for priority in her life. I made the decision to end the engagement. Breaking off the engagement was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My fiancé, now ex-fiancé, was heartbroken, and I didn't come out of it unscathed either. For weeks, I second-guessed myself, wondering if I had made the right choice. Her parents, unsurprisingly, were furious. They accused me of abandoning her and of being selfish for not supporting their family. Some of our mutual friends even sided with her, saying I should have been more willing to compromise. But I also received messages of support from people who understood my perspective. David was a rock through it all, reminding me that I deserved a relationship built on mutual respect and shared values. In the months since the breakup, I focused on rebuilding my life. I used my bonus to buy my first home, a milestone I'd worked so hard to achieve. While it felt bittersweet at first, it eventually became a symbol of my independence and the future I wanted to create. I've also taken time to reflect on what I want in a partner. I've realized how important it is to have someone who values open communication, respects boundaries, and shares my vision for the future. As for my ex-fiancée, we haven't spoken much since the breakup. From what I've heard through mutual friends, she's still close with her family and trying to move on in her own way. I hope she finds someone who aligns better with her values and priorities.